them and its management. Attorney Nathaniel Lee, a lawyer with credibility, success, and experience, representing people in hundreds of jury trials, Nathaniel Lee is who you want by your side in the courtroom. You've seen the rest, now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Feigley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legally Speaking. Here are today's...
Good morning, everyone. Praise the Lord that we're here another Saturday. And I'd like to thank for being able to wake up today. And I have my superstar panel today, Milton Grimes and Marlon Prime, superstars in our profession. And we got a lot of things to cover today. And there's so many things. But before I get started, one of the things I got to talk about, some of the fundamentals that we've been talking about, a lot of issues lately. But here's one that near and dear to me, that is the right to vote. What I've discovered just by talking to people that come to my law firm, that most people don't realize that once they have an incident with law enforcement, such as arrest, conviction, or otherwise, or spend time in jail or in prison, uniformly, by just talking to the last 10 people, all 10 folks told me that they lost their right to vote because of arrest or conviction or served time in jail or prison. That's false. Folks, in most states, like in Indiana, you can vote even in jail if you by absentee ballot, but if you're in prison, you lose your right to vote until you get out of prison. So the day you get out of prison, you can go register to vote again. And I was stunned that one of the guys told me that the prison people told him that he can't vote anymore in life. That's a lie. You get your right to vote once you get out of prison. All you do is register again. In Indiana, I looked up the contiguous states and I discovered in all the surrounding states, it was similar rules. And California seemed like a little bit more liberal, but most of the states, your rights are restored once you get out of prison. I know you think otherwise, but in a lot of these southern states, I saw that they have different voting rules. And but nevertheless, here in our state, folks, if you serve time in jail, whether misdemeanor, felony, or otherwise, once you're out of prison, register to vote because we need you. Now, having said that, Milton, Marlon, I tell you, there's a lot of issues that are going on. There are so many legal matters that are hidden. It's almost like legal whiplash. The Trump administration, the one thing they've done, they've created more litigation in a couple months than all the other administration combined. I mean, it's like every day is a new lawsuit. I can't keep track of them. Which one do we start with today, gentlemen?
Be my guest, Marlon.
Well, excuse me. I'm interested in the case where the judge clearly ordered the Department of Justice to turn around planes that were headed out of the country, and apparently those weren't complied with by the Department of Justice. So he had subsequent hearings to say, hey, when was the order received? Hey, when did these planes take off? When did they land? So that has to work its way through the fact-finding process. It appears the judge is not happy. And as a consequence, I mean, he could, issue sanctions. He could, take action adverse to the ability of those litigants to practice. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works its way out.
Well, here's the problem. The problem is they're attaching false information that they're assimilating the public. They say that these are terrorists, these are criminals, without any evidence.
Right.
I saw one of the lawyers said her client had never committed a crime in his life, never been charged, but yet he's characterized as a felon or as a terrorist because they're justifying the result. What is sickening about this whole process, quite frankly, that is insulting, is that Doge says that we've uncovered massive fraud in the federal government. And a certain percentage of the population believe that what he said is true. Folks, it's false. if you engage in fraudulent conduct in the federal government, you will be indicted. Nobody's been charged. Nobody's been indicted. So that tells you that this is just an utter lie. You know, I can't make it any clearer than that. It's just insulting to me that they toss around these terms and people believe it. You can't just go and steal money for the federal government. There's consequences, you know. So plus the fact there's so many levels of management until that's a difficult thing to do. I'm not saying that we have a perfect system. Sure, there's going to be mistakes along the way, but the biggest recipient, probably one of the biggest recipients in the country of federal money, is Elon Musk himself. And so the fact that he's criticizing his agency is a little bit insulting. But more or less something that's equally important. Your law school did something that this law firm Perkins Coie couldn't do. They wimped out. What did your law school at Georgetown did?
Yeah, I am so proud of my my law school, Georgetown Law School, and Dean Trainer. What happened is the acting U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, which is the largest U.S. attorney's office in the country, sent the dean a letter indicating that the Department of Justice would no longer consider Georgetown graduates for employment, whether that be for internships or permanent employment, unless they got rid of this amorphous term about diversity programs. And, the dean basically indicated that he first thought that the letter was a joke. And, once he verified that, in fact, it was coming from the U.S. Attorney's Office, he sent a pretty courageous letter, saying that many firms have not taken, unfortunately, and basically said that, hey, we are, the oldest, Catholic Jesuit institution in the country, the first, law school with the evening program, one of the first law schools in the country to embrace diversity, that's kind of part of our mission as a Jesuit Catholic institution. And, part of the First Amendment dictates that you cannot tell a school, what to teach and how to teach it. And, he ended the letter, indicating that, he trusts that, all Georgetown graduates in the future will get fair consideration. So I thought it was a courageous move. And it wasn't without consequences. Georgetown sits in D.C., as many of you all know. The law school is in downtown in the Capitol Hill area. And there was a lot at stake. I mean, there's a lot of our graduates that do work for the federal government, do have internships. And, he, took a courageous stand and said, hey, we're going to stand on principle. We're going to stand on what the Constitution says. And take a stand. So, fortunately, he's gotten the support of the board and the community at large in terms of the statement and stance that Georgetown has taken.
So there's a position now that the DOJ will not hire these students in the summer program or after they graduate for the DOJ?
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate. I mean, just imagine, we were all law students and we got our first job offer, whether it be at the government or a private firm, our own firms. And what the Department of Justice did is that after these individuals were selected for the honors program or other internship program, they just pulled their job offers. So there are people that did not take, jobs at other, employers, thinking they're going to be working at the United States Department of Justice. So it's just very, very discouraging and untenable for a government to do that, and then just take a wide view that they're not going to hire individuals, not looking on an individual basis, but almost kind of doing collective punishment. So very unfortunate and very discouraging.
That would definitely have an effect with the graduating class of June, say, of this year, right?
Without question. And also not only the graduating class, but those that are first and second years, right, that are, looking to, work at DOJ or any of the federal agencies. When I was in Washington, one of the, great things about, going to law school in DC is that there's so many opportunities to work not only during the summer, but during the school year. During the school year, while I was a full-time student, I had a job at the National Labor Relations Board, and I was a law clerk. And at that time, I was right across the street from the White House. And these are just invaluable opportunities, whether it's a federal agency or working on Capitol Hill. But to basically take a blanket approach and not really have, individual inquiry about, the person's qualifications or suitability, and just say, on a blanket level, hey, we're not going to hire you because, hey, your law school teaches this amorphous concept about diversity, which is subject to many, interpretations. And that's why a number of courts around the country have struck down these edicts that you can't teach diversity or you can't teach woke, because it's really hard to define. It's in the eyes of the beholder. And as a consequence of that uncertainty, you have people banning books regarding Ruby Bridges, who integrated New Orleans public schools. So I was really, grateful that a law school that educated me really took a stand, and very discouraged. Nathaniel mentioned a number of law firms that have been around for decades, some cases centuries, that haven't taken a stand. Paul Weiss being one of them, and and I think it's certainly a very unfortunate incident.
Well, some of those law firms, they have taken a stand and that they're backing off of accepting clients with civil rights complaints.
Yeah, now what they're doing, particularly as relates to Paul Weiss, what the president did was unprecedented in the sense that he attacked individual law firms and individual people. So anyone that was involved in any prosecution regarding the president when he was a candidate, anyone who employed those folks, he was saying that, hey, I'm going to revoke the security clearance for that law firm. And without a security clearance, there's a number of cases that you can't not even qualify to conduct. For example, if there's cases involving national security, contracts. I mean, the federal government, is the largest employer, the largest creditor, largest debtor, largest landowner. So, all that legal work cannot just be handled by, government attorneys. They farm a lot of that work out, and that's very valuable work. So if you're talking about, a contract worth billions of dollars, and it involves, classified information, whether it's CIA or FBI or the Defense Department, and, a law firm is hired by a client trying to get one of those contracts, that law firm has to have a security clearance. And if that law firm does not have a security clearance, they're ineligible for a large, swath of work. So knowing that this is a big part of their budget, a lot of law firms, particularly Paul Weiss, this, leader of Paul Weiss met with President Trump, privately, and basically said that, hey, we will get rid of all of our diversity programs. Number one, we will give you $40 million in kind services for pro bono. And so it's very chilling. So what a number of us think will happen is that it will put pressure on other law firms to make similar deals. Now, there are some law firms, I think Perkins Coie, law firms in DC that have, sued because, their law firms were singled out by the president, executive orders, and they've been successful. So I'm hoping that these law firms that did sue and got, injunctive relief, that will cause, more firms to stand up and not, go the Paul Weiss route, which is a prominent law firm that, as I indicated before, made a deal with the president.
That is a chilling effect.
Yeah, but as a litigator, I got to be quite frank with you, folks. If my lawyer is such a wimp that when they're attacked, it is such a clear, unambiguous violation of legal standards, violation of any imagine with tort law or civil law that they fold that easy. So what that lead me to think that what they would sell their clients out the same way. I mean, as a litigator, you got to fight for your clients. And if you can't fight for yourself, maybe they shouldn't be a firm. I wouldn't hire a law firm that's that big of a wimp, quite frankly. It's insulting to the legal profession what they did. The fact that they agreed to do these nonprofit things that they select, so he could have them do a nonprofit thing for white supremacists, for example. And so the whole thing just doesn't sit very well with me, and I've kind of lost respect for that law firm.
Well, Nate, I don't think it's any worse than our congressmen and senators bowing down and changing their voting position in support of the president when, contrarily, a year or so ago, they had another stance. So it's the same cowardless position.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Milton. You know, this isn't it certainly this isn't a profile in courage.
No.
And if you look, and I'll single one person out, and there are multiple people that kind of fall within this same dynamic. Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina was very adamant on January 6th after then President Trump encouraged a mob to attack the Capitol of the United States. And these senators and Congress people were in the building. And, and I'll just put a personal note on that. My daughter at that time was working on Capitol Hill. And so I'm in the middle of a deposition and my, wife is calling incessantly. And so, all of us know that means there's something going on. So I pause the deposition and she says, well, hey, are you watching the news? Like, no, I'm in a deposition. So they overrun the Capitol. We can't find our daughter. And, so, what I encountered, there are a number of people encountered the same thing that had children, colleagues, family members, friends that were either working in the Capitol or police officers. The other thing that's not reported is that they evacuated Congress, like Nancy Pelosi, but her staff was left to fend for themselves. So they were kids in their 20s. Most of them are volunteers, and they were barricaded in, some of these leaders' offices, and you have a mob of people, knocking on the door, pounding on the door, saying they were going to hang, then Speaker of the House, Pelosi. So, as a consequence of seeing that, Congress, members of Congress, Senator Graham, others, were very adamant that what had been done was wrong.
Right.
That they were through with him. And then you're right. They just turned tail. And, next thing you know, they are embracing him. So what Paul Weiss has done, unfortunately, is the same behavior that many prominent members of our government or our Congress, senators, congressmen have really taken as well. So it's a very unfortunate occurrence. You would think that, we would have unanimity when the capital of our country is attacked. And we all saw those terrible photos. We saw individuals that were attacking the Capitol and they were carrying a Confederate flag. That had never happened, even during the Civil War. So we can't agree that that's problematic. It certainly is very, very bothersome. And we're seeing the same sorts of things when we're talking about, other individuals that have the opportunity, like Georgetown, to stand up and take a stand that refuse to do so.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, I got a few chills just listening to you talk about it and your daughter. So what is his threat on people? Can it be simply that your position will be taken away, or is it life-threatening? What is the threat that he's posing to our country and people and institutions to make them back down? It's concerning. I
think it's money. I think, some of these law firms, if you look at some of the, top, 100 law firms, I mean, their annual revenue, I mean, it's not millions. Some of them are making billions of dollars. And, unfortunately, you would think that because they have that money, they would be able to take a stand. But no,
Right.
they're saying, hey, we're not going to take a stand. We're not going to do anything that's going to limit these billions of dollars that we're getting. And unfortunately, we don't have, individuals in some of these firms with firm spines. Now, we have to be positive that there are some law firms that have in fact sued the administration and gotten injunctive relief. So it's just my hope that there will be more, firms, businesses that will take a stand and say, hey, we will not be moved. But it's just very disconcerting that, Paul Weiss, a very influential firm, has decided that, hey, I'm going to, bow down. And then to have the leader of that prestigious law firm, meet with the president in private and then basically sell out African Americans, and
Yes.
people of color and women, saying, hey, yes, we will end all diversity programs. I
And
mean,
so I'm calling everybody today, if you do business with Paul Weiss, you pull out, find another law firm. They're a bunch of wimps.
correct.
But there were so many important stories that came out this week, and I want to lay into the Department of Education. I grew up in the South, and the schools were segregated, and we had used textbook. All my teachers and staff were Black folks, and for the first 8 years of my education, and then we had some civil rights laws passed, and ultimately one of the instruments that enforced desegregation courts and trying to create equal opportunity was the Department of Education. They had federal enforcement of civil rights laws, and now they say they want to return back to the states the Department of Education duties and responsibility. One was enforcement of civil rights laws, making access to education fair for everyone. And we know with certain states like Mississippi, yeah, I'm calling them out, who they fought for years to get rid of the Confederate flag. What about having a bunch of white supremacists in charge of your state, and all of a sudden, what are we looking at now? I just, when you took away the Justice Department Civil Rights Division, and now we're taking away, they're saying that civil rights for minorities no longer exists.
Well, Nate, I'm reading this book entitled Containment, talks about the segregation or the integration of our educational system throughout the country. And segregation wasn't just in the South. It was deeply in Detroit, Chicago, and New York, and Philly, and northern cities as well. And it was just a different fight to integrate the school system. So this attack on the education department is going to involve education throughout the country, not just the South.
And one thing you need to know that's important, the lawyer that did the DSEG lawsuits here in Indianapolis was a lawyer named John Moss. John Moss started that lawsuit probably back in the 70s. The lawsuit that led to desegregation in Indianapolis or Indiana ended in 2003.
That's what I'm talking about.
I represented John Moss in his attorney fees at the conclusion of the case, to get attorney fees at the end of the case in 2003, folks. So
right.
We're only talking about a little bit over 20 years that the desegregation lawsuit in this city and state ended.
I just want to get across, it's not just the South that had to deal with it. It's across the board, California, northern cities and northern places. And to turn this back over to the states puts us back, in my honest opinion.
Hey, Marlon, at the Justice Department, how you were there for forever, they did enforcement of civil rights. I'm concerned that they've kind of terminated that program.
Right. There's a really interesting article in the Washington Post that I really recommend to your viewers, and it really talks about how the Department of Justice, hasn't been perfect. There have been, flaws, but there was an understanding that they were separate and distinct from the federal government. from the administration, so to speak, and that their job was to ensure, like their name, that justice was in fact done. So it was unprecedented to have the President of the United States come to the Department of Justice and give a political speech, castigating opponents, castigating those that, in good faith attempted to prosecute him for January 6th in related instance. There was a referral, at least according to press reports, that he was referred to as the chief law enforcement officer. And that's not the way it was designed to be. You were supposed to be, as an official of the Department of Justice, irrespective of who is in office, you're supposed to call balls and strikes as you see them to protect, our Constitution, our democracy. So in answer to your question as it relates to, the civil rights enforcement, the article in the Washington Post just talks about how they're transforming the Civil Rights Division. Now, let's just kind of give your audience a historical perspective of what the office of the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. Many of you all, and Milton may remember this as well. When Little Rock was integrated, the Little Rock School was integrated. Those famous pictures, those were officials from the United States Department of Justice that came down and said, hey, we are going to, integrate these schools. The same with other cities that were integrated. That was what the Department of Justice did. And in fact, a more recent memory, after Rodney King was acquitted, it was the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice that prosecuted those police officers in federal court. So that was the prior role, the recognized role of the Civil Rights Division. Now, Attorney General Pam Bondi is turning that mission on its head, and now she's basically saying that they're going to use the powers of the Department of Justice to pursue reverse discrimination claims, to see if law firms are engaged in diversity initiative, which are just designed to make sure that everyone's being treated fairly. We're really seeing a great transformation of what the Department of Justice, particularly the Civil Rights Division, was designed to do. And now we're, almost appear to be doing the bidding of the the particular initiatives of one president that seem to really run counter to the history of the Civil Rights Division.
Mark, hey, Milton, real quickly. Hey, Milton, explain he hit a nerve with me. The Justice Department had to prosecute the cop and Rodney King. What happened in that case in state court that made it necessary for the Justice Department to be involved in that case?
Let me just make this thought and then I'll address that question. It bothers me and concerns me that the FBI for a long time, Marlon, as you may recollect or at least have read, used to stand by and watch discrimination and the brutality amongst the civil rights workers be perpetrated and not do a thing. Then they started acting on that. It concerns me now that we're going back to what has happened in the past, and that is no prosecution by the Justice Department of officers who have violated the law and have violated citizens' civil rights if they are going to be influenced by this administration. The Department of Justice won't step in like they did in addressing your question, Nate, in the King case, where the 4 officers that were charged, and I'll throw this in there, all 27 officers should have been charged with criminal conduct in that case, Nate. And I've always maintained that, even though my colleagues disagreed with me back in 1994 when we tried the Rodney King case, that we should have sued all of them for violating his civil rights. But anyway, the 4 who were charged, Bersenio, Wynn, Kuhn, and Powell being the #1 beater of King for that minute and 16 seconds, they were vindicated, so to speak, in Simi Valley. They were charged with the assault on Rodney King in Simi Valley, those 4 officers. And 3 of them were found not guilty, and 1, it was a hung jury for not guilty. So the judge eventually dismissed his case too. So that was a Simi Valley trial in state court, where the prosecution didn't object to the case being tried in Simi Valley, which is a police haven. retirement haven.
Yeah, but how did that happen? How did they get a change of venue when that happened?
Because the prosecution didn't object, because they didn't fight for fair justice, even though they knew that that was a police retirement haven. That's how it was moved there, because the prosecution felt they couldn't get a fair trial in Los Angeles for their officers. So they tried it in Simi Valley. The federal department, the Department of Justice, as Marlon was just talking about, they picked up the prosecution and prosecuted them in federal court for the violation of King's civil rights. And fortunately, 2 of them were found guilty. 2 were found not guilty. Powell and Kuhn, the sergeant, were found guilty in the federal prosecution, because that's the law. You can get prosecuted state court and federal court for the violation of those same civil rights. So that's how it happened. But my concern is, I go back, that the Justice Department deputies, as they did in a case that I referred to them about 3 years ago, where the 5 officers were fired by the city of Inglewood for killing this black lady. The the DA's office in LA decided not to prosecute, even though the 5 officers were fired by Inglewood. And I contacted the federal prosecutor in charge of that department, and he said he would review the case, but they came back with no prosecution. That's just a personal issue I have about that. But that's how they got in the federal court and prosecuted in federal court for an injustice that occurred in state court. But I'm concerned that that will cease to exist, that overview now, with Trump administration influencing the decision of those prosecutors.
And what about Milton and Nathaniel? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was concerned about something he just said. My concern is that it looked like the Department of Justice is completely eliminating civil rights enforcement in America.
Well, not only that, they're trying to reverse some of these consent decrees, right, regarding these cities. And that's been, prominently indicated in the news and in filings. And the administration has been very vocal that they're going to try to unwind these consent decrees. And just so your audience, understands, if there's an allegation in the community of, repeated systematic police misconduct, the prior role of the Department of Justice is that you would refer that to the Civil Rights Division for investigation. And they would enter into a consent decree with these police departments that they were going to have constitutional policing. They'd have a framework in terms of how they were going to get there. And so these are long-term agreements. So the position of this Department of Justice and this administration is that, irrespective of all that fact-finding, all that process indicating that, segments of the population aren't being treated fairly, that they entered into a consent decree, they're going to try to say you no longer have the right to enforce that consent decree. And so that's going to have an adverse impact on our people. But go ahead.
Did they already destroy the data bank that was collecting information on police officers across the country that's needed to show that, like the one officer who killed the lady, I forgot what city it was, in her kitchen, who shot this sister that was not armed except with a pot? He had been fired from 6 other police departments prior to that. We're not going to have that information available any longer. They've already done that.
Yeah, and that's important because we've had a situation here in Cleveland where I believe the Tamir Rice case, where a young boy had a toy gun and was shot. Come to find out, those that were involved in that case, like Milton said, in other cases, in that particular case, they had been fired by another police department. So the issue is in the civil rights community, they're saying, well, hey, there should be a database to show, hey, if they've had, misconduct, unconstitutional policing, there should be a database. So when a person goes to a new police department, they can see that and the community can see that to, ensure that, hey, we're not hiring individuals that have a pattern of misconduct, so to speak.
Right. In Cleveland, wasn't that where the 137 shot case was, Mauro?
Exactly.
His
Exactly.
pop shot 40 some times standing on the hood of the car. Nate, you remember that?
Crazy
Boom,
case.
just destroyed these people. You follow me? And the judge said he was in fear, if I
Correct.
recall the outcome. Now that case should have been picked up by the Justice Department, y'all.
Correct. But that was one of the reasons why the consent decree was entered into. And, because of cases like that, and there were other cases where, individuals were shot, seriously injured, killed. And that was part of the fact-finding process that led to the consent decree in Cleveland. So irrespective of that, it appears to be the Department of Justice position that, doesn't matter about those facts. We want to unwind these agreements. And so the question is going to be, hey, what message is that going to send to frontline supervisors, frontline, police officers, whether or not they have to, comply with the dictates of the law?
It's going to send a message that it's okay. The courts are going to let us off. They're going to take care of us like it used to be.
Correct. Correct. And that's certainly problematic. I mean, it's just been example after example in terms of mistreatment. And, these are individuals, as, Johnny Cochran, so eloquently indicated, we hire them. We're the ultimate people that determine, what is right through the jury system and through the political process. And, it's important that, we get the word out to our collective communities that, hey, this is important. These consent decrees were entered into for a reason. And, we have to be involved in these citizens review panels. We have to be involved in our election process. A number of police chiefs are appointed by the mayor. Hey, we need to be vocal in terms of making sure that they're hiring people that have our best interests at heart and that are going to be fair and they're going to follow the Constitution.
Hey, one final question on this, that Rice case that Milton just mentioned, did they ever get a settlement on that, the family?
They did get a settlement on that case, thankfully, but it took years of litigation, multiple counsel in that case, but there was a resolution.
Glad to hear that. Well, the next issue, there's so many issues. You talked about this case earlier, dealt with immigration. Man, I keep seeing these stories where you have Hispanic and different folks from Venezuela, from Cuba and all that, who were big supporters of Trump. And I saw that they're revoking their status and that the biggest fear is that the enforcement, ICE, when they're arresting people, they're pouring guns at them as though they're going to shoot and kill them. And I was concerned about that. These are hardworking individuals, whatever the situation is, and they put everybody into a category, and make up terms like they're murderers, they're criminals, they're drug dealers, with no evidence. And I'm concerned about that. And we're seeing an eradication of our constitutional laws right in front of our eyes.
Isn't the rule of a gunman or the training is when you point your gun at something, you intend to destroy it. You don't point your gun unless you intend to use it. That's the next step.
Well, I mean, we're a country of laws, and, no matter, what a president, believes to, be his marching orders or political campaign, the process is an individual has to be charged. They have to have a right to be heard. There's a whole immigration, where a person appears before an administrative law judge. All those things have to be adhered to. So what happened regarding these gang members, they tried to use an act that's nearly 200 years old to say that, hey, they don't need due process. They don't need a hearing. We can just pick them up and deport them. And the federal district court judge said clearly, no, this is a misapplication of this law. It only had been applied during times of war. And we're not at war. And nevertheless, the administration, still pushed back and said, hey, this particular law is still applicable. So it will be interesting to see how this case goes forward. And then to Nathaniel's point, a number of the individuals that were alleged to be gang members and were deported without the benefit of a hearing because the administration relied upon this act, come to find out, according to their lawyers, many of them weren't members of this notorious gang. Some had tattoos that were thought to symbolize membership in that particular notorious gang. Come to find out, these are tattoos for a soccer team that the person enjoyed, or a tattoo that has no relationship to the gang. And that's the very reason why you have a legal process before someone is determined that they don't have a right to be here. Now, I know a number of your viewers will say, okay, well, someone has engaged in impropriety, killed, maimed somebody, they should, be deported. I get that. But I think the point that we're making as lawyers is that make that case in a court of law. Detain them, but give them their right to explain, hey, it's a mistake. And if it turns out that they are guilty and they have not complied with law, I think most people would say, okay, they should be deported. But the problem here is that the administration was trying to jump over that entire process of giving the right to hurt and them being the judge, jury, and executioner and sending people out of the country to a notorious prison in El Salvador that is known for not adhering to basic human rights. People are sleeping on concrete. They're not being fed. They're people that are being attacked and killed and maimed. So we have to really think about that as a society, because, if they violate person X's rights, what's to say they're not going to violate our rights down the line? We have to, stand up and let people be aware of what is going on.
I have read and watched the video on the El Salvador new prison. It's built to house 60,000 prisoners and to treat them as inhumane as one could imagine. And our representative, Rubio, I think, met with the president of El Salvador, and they're talking about having an agreement to deport some of our prisoners to that particular prison. It is absolutely a non-human friendly institution. Have you seen the videos? Have you seen the pictures of it? It's crazy. 60,000 people housed in small areas like that. But
in one prison?
In one prison, 60,000. That's what it's built to take away humanity. That's the purpose of it. The guys got to come in bent down with their heads down and treated like an animal, stripped, just their shorts, all of them, and housed together because of their tattooing it. It's just part of it. They're categorizing and classifying people because they got tattoos. And I hate to bring in a personal thing, Nate, but just to illustrate the point, my son fell on the street 3 blocks away from my office from a heart attack. And he was well tattooed. He had Thug Life across his stomach because he was a serious friend of Tupac. But the opposite was he hates gangs. And he has tattoo of his mother and his tattoo of this and tattoos of that, but no gang tattoos because he absolutely was a non-gang member and hated gangs. But I never forget that the neighbors said that the police wouldn't let the paramedics get to him to render assistance to him while he was floundering around on the ground trying to get air because of this attack. And for some time, some minutes, they would not let the paramedics attend to him because he had, quote, not been searched. He had $1,000 in his pocket. He was not a gangbanger. But because he had not been searched, according to the officers, they finally took him to the hospital and he died 7 days later. Never gained consciousness because of tattoos or because of racism. And I investigated, looked into it, and that wasn't the only situation where they would let African Americans and Hispanics bleed out in some cases if they'd been shot. But in this case, he hadn't been shot. He just succumbed to a heart attack while walking down the street, and we didn't know he had a heart problem. So it's a personal thing to me about. I saw a young girl weighed 80 pounds the other day. She had beautiful tattoos on her arm. Nothing gang related. Uh,
No, and I'm so sorry to hear that. That certainly, breaks your heart, and I'm sure, all of our
yeah,
hearts,
yeah.
go out to you and your family, and that's a wound that is difficult to
It
heal.
ain't healed yet.
Yes,
20
yes,
years.
yes.
It would never, I would never get past that. I've worked so hard on these police misconduct cases because, we all grew up with experiences during our lifetime. And one of the things that happened to me that, you look at these civil rights laws, why I'm such a big proponent of them, is that I went out to play golf when I first started playing. And this officer, when we got in an area that was isolated in Indy, he pulled over, and the first thing he did was unstrap his gun, right? And I had a passenger. We have golf attire. I wasn't speeding, didn't break any law, and he approached in such a hostile manner. Before, I was a young lawyer at the time. He didn't know me, and in fact, if I had done any movement, he would have shot me.
Right.
So I filed internal affairs complaint against him because that was a year in which in Indiana, the state was late sending out license plate renewals. And it was on TV that they're running about 2 weeks late. Well, it turns out that my license plate ironically arrived that day. I had ordered it like a month and a half ago, but they were late to send them out. So he wrote a ticket that, of course, got dismissed. But what irked me more than anything else, I reported it and I tried to record part of it. They did nothing about it
Right.
in the city, and so I realized then that we have to do a better job of changing the narrative on this issue. So the only remedy, of course, if you have encountered with police officer folk, file citizen complaint. They have teeth now. They actually investigate these things. And I think the current composition, they're doing a pretty decent job. They've, in our city, it led to probably more arrests of police officers for misconduct than any time ever in our history. So make sure if you're a victim of misconduct, record it, file the complaint, follow up with it, because I think it's very important. But there's so many things that happen. We only got a few more minutes left, but one of the things that bothered me this week was the food bank defunded. I didn't understand that. What are you trying to do? Make poor folks die of starvation now? What the hell's going on with this food bank? Did you?
What's the logical conclusion for depriving people of food? It is not to help them.
Yeah, this is just really unfortunate. And, as I've indicated before, the holy grail of the conservative movement has been to eradicate what happened during the New Deal. And this is kind of a part of that. And then the other part of that is to eradicate what happened of the programs that were initiated when President Lyndon Baines Johnson was president. So, what you're going to hear is you're going to hear a lot of rhetoric that, hey, we're going to return all this to the states. Well, the reason why it was nationalized was because the states weren't doing a good job. It wasn't uniform. People were starving and hungry. And so I'm just hopeful that we don't have to go back to a time, before a lot of these programs were put in place. Now, the other thing I think that we have to be aware of as people is that we've seen this movie before. When they want to get rid of these safety net programs that help all of us, if we were down on our luck, is they have one example of fraud, and they say, hey, this is an example of everything in the program, and we fall for it. And I think we have to be, mindful that, hey, any program is going to have fraud, and it's not, enough to eradicate or end the entire program. These things are important. We have a lot of veterans that are down in their luck. We have people that, may have lost a job through no fault of their own. And these are important safety net programs to get people back on their feet so they can be, participants in society and the economy. So very unfortunate.
I see it every day. Despite being the wealthiest country on the planet, every day I see humans suffering. You can't go anywhere and not see people that are homeless. They're on the street corner, ask for money. Next door, I see a couple guys sleep outside. They cover up with garments, whatever they can during the cold weather. And so people have adverse circumstances during their life. And a lot of us, no matter how successful we are, we also could have failures. And so you see these people that have these hardship, and these programs, I think, are necessary in order to have a society where people just don't randomly die and stuff. And it wasn't a lot of money we're talking about. And I see our phone line blowing up. Yeah, but in any event, it was only $500 million, and they're taking that away from poor folks. Sad. Okay, Carl, you have a question or comment for us today?
Well, I wanted to thank you guys for this show. This has really been a great one to listen to. And I'm so sorry for all of your personal experiences that that you've had to bring to forefront of what these people are trying and doing and how it happens. And I'm really sorry, Attorney Grimes, about your son. And I'm thankful that Attorney Grimes, your daughter, is well. And so I appreciate these shows because you guys give us so much personal enlightenment on what's really happening now and all this experience that comes with it, and some of it tragic. But anyway, I just wanted to say thank you guys for the show. I really appreciate listening to you today. And as far as what they're doing is to basically trying to eliminate us and to weaken us. And that's the bottom line. I'm one of that 92% that's going to sit on my behind, my brown round, and I ain't going to no protest, because basically I think they're trying to use Black people's protests to call out martial law. And I just wanted to know what you guys think of that. And then I'm going to hang up because I know we're at the end of your show. But I really appreciate it.
Renee, tell me about that New York mayor's race. You've been on top of that.
Oh, my gosh. Basically, there's nothing really happening. I'm not seeing a lot of anybody taking the lead. People thought Cuomo was going to be doing better than he has, but I haven't seen that. But I will do a little more research, and as we get closer, because that's not, honey, can you take that in the room? Take it to the room. And before when we get a little bit closer to the primary, I think we'll see more of what's happening there. But I'll keep you guys posted. I'll definitely put something in the chat next week once I've looked at it, but not too much. I'm running for a council. I'm running for a council position for Department of Education here in Brooklyn. So I've been a little bit busy with my campaign. So I've been doing that as well. But there's not much happening. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Wishes.
Yeah. Good luck to you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, I'm going to hang up and let you guys finish.
Hey, Renee,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Put that in the chat. I'll make a donation. Put it in the chat, your campaign.
Oh, I really appreciate you. Okay, thank you. I'll put it in the chat probably after the show is over, because I want to hear what you guys are going to say about the what I just asked you about. So I'm going to hang up and then listen to you guys. Thank you so much.
Right. We got to be very, very careful because I think you're absolutely right. There is a reason why, the African American chair, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and others were removed, and there were, acolytes that were put in those positions. I think they were put in there for a reason, and I think we have to be very, very careful, about these circumstances. We had a great tragedy that many of you, will remember, and that was at Kent State University, where we had a conservative governor that thought that he had a mandate for law and order. And so in 1972, they sent the National Guard, regarding protest at Kent State University in Ohio, and a number of people got killed. So I think your finger is exactly on the pulse in terms of that we need military that are well trained. We need people that are going to adhere to the military code of justice and not to one individual. And that's something that we really have to keep our eye on.
You know what's concerning to me, Marvin, about the military thing is I had lunch with a friend of mine Thursday, I think it was, who says that she's in close with the person who's in touch with the military's attitude now, and that the military, contrary to back 4 years ago, when you recall Trump in front of the White House with the Bible upside down and was totally a phony show, that we all thought the military would not support him, that the military would not get behind him. But her belief, or the people in touch with the sensitivity of the military, said now that there's a concern that the military would be supportive of the President of the United States because of the change in the leadership in the military in the last so many years. So I don't know if we can, and I don't know facts. Okay, I'm just sharing a conversation. But there's a concern that this military would be supportive of the President of the United States if he gave a command on the streets of our country. So we have a different situation than we had 4 years ago involving the military, according to this person.
Yeah, the other nuance of that is that, Supreme Court in their affirmative action decision basically indicated the diversity, can still take place in terms of recruitment at the military academies for, purposes of readiness. And the new administration has really taken a very extreme view in my assessment. As a result, they're eliminating, references to diversity. There was an elimination, at least temporary, of Jackie Robinson on one of the websites. They've, abolished recognition of very many holidays. So within that group, these are the people that are going to be making life and death decisions, whether or not they follow the rule of law or whether they follow, an unconstitutional order. So it's something that's very, very troubling.
Right.
Well, listen, I'd like to thank our audience for joining our show today. We're at the end of our show, and I thank our VIP guests. They enlightened us. And join us next Saturday as we deal with legal issues of the day. It seems like now we're having legal whiplash. We can't keep up with all the legal filings each week just by the Trump administration. It's impossible. Well, thank you, everyone, and nice to talk to you.